prophet draws his cause from Jesus and not from ideology. Begin with a story. Some years ago, I was listening to an interview on television, and this woman, and she's an Episcopalian priest from San Francisco, and her whole work, she's working prophetically, but in the whole area of, ecology, trying to save the planet, leaving less footprint, less carbon, climate change, so on. Okay. So she travels around the country. She's written some books on that, and she travels around the country, and she does workshops on this. So at one point, the announcer said to her, the interviewer says, I can see this would go over well in liberal San Francisco, liberal California. He said, but how does that go over in Oklahoma? How does it go over in Texas? How does it go over, in states that aren't California or Oregon or Washington? And she said, no problem at all. She said something very profound. She says, sincere people will listen to the gospel, no matter where they live. She said, I've learned a lesson. She says, whenever I slip into ideology, they shut me down. Said, if I'm talking from Jesus, they'll hear it. And we have to be really careful. See, in all justice cases, whether it's, to do with racism, whether it's to do with the ecology, whether it's to do with feminism, whatever, and so on, there are real Jesus issues, okay? But they're so encrusted today with ideology that oftentimes you can't find Jesus in there. And people can walk away from ideology. Sincere people won't walk away from Jesus. That's the difference. Maybe it's an unfair example because they do great work, but that's the difference between Greenpeace and Jesus. They're saying the same thing, except they're not saying exactly the same thing. Any ideological movement, and don't get me wrong, Greenpeace does try to save the planet, but they're trying to save it ideologically, and it puts them into strange positions. So I'll give you an example where you see the anomalies. So for instance, I come from Canada, and back home our natives, are probably the most sensitive to nature, they can teach us lots of lessons. They live close to nature. They have this long history of treating nature well, and so on. And so if you go out every spring, there's a huge confrontation happens on the shores of Newfoundland when all these rock stars and Greenpeace and Paul McCartney and Bridget Bardot and all these people come and they line up and to stop the seal hunt. This is really terrible. And the natives who are so tuned to worship said, no, we kill seals. We do this reverently, and we use their furs, and they have no problem with wearing leather and fur and so on. If you're in Greenpeace, you have a lot of problem wearing fur or leather or whatever. Now, they're both fighting for the same cause, but notice at a certain point, they're on different sides, because Greenpeace, for all the good they do, it's an ideology. And there's many, and it's not that ideology is necessarily bad, but they're ideologies. And someone can say, I walk away from that. You can't walk away from Jesus, And so, and you see it very clearly there. So oftentimes, fighting for the planet or fighting for anything, that as soon as you get into ideology, it'll polarize. And even though it seems like this is the right cause, Greenpeace isn't bad. They're trying to clean the oceans up. This is very well done. But see, it can be rejected because it's an ideology. Jesus, for a Christian of sincere conscience, you can't walk away, But also, see, in ideology, because ideologies always, they have blind spots. All ideologies have huge blind spots, and at a certain point, they'll become too rigid. All ideologies become fundamentalistic at a point. I'll talk about that later, one of the commandments. That you can't be a fundamentalist, And what happens with a fundamentalist is, after a while, they see everything through the prism of one idea. So everything goes through this one prism, and oftentimes you start losing the forest for the trees. See, notice the natives, when they're to talk about nature, they're not looking through one prism, they're looking through a wide prism. People need food, people need shelter, people need leather shoes, and they stay warm in wintertime with furs and so on. And, as noticed, natives have never abused nature in terms of killing for the sake of killing and so on. But they say, no, nature, we can use nature reverently. Greenpeace says, no, you can't, but you see there the difference between if you come out of an ideology. So, for instance, or you come out of Jesus. Pope Francis just wrote a wonderful, powerful new encyclical called Laudate Si on the environment, on climate change. To my mind, it's not ideology. He's trying to ground this in deep Christian and moral principle. That's harder to reject.